In this eighth and final module, we will discuss the Buddha's teachings on settling disputes. Disputes happen. It is naive to assume that disputes will not arise, even among a community of monks. The Buddha recommended skillful means to settle disputes among monks. Though many of the suttas in this module focus on settling disputes arising within the community of monks, the same principles apply for lay people. Before jumping into a bunch of suttas, let me share with you some advice on resolving disputes in Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is my favorite non-Buddhist book. I mentioned this book at the beginning of the day when I talked about focusing on your circle of influence. Now, the first 3 habits in this book focus on developing your own character. The next 3, the habits that I'll share with you now, focus on settling disputes. Habit 4. Think win-win. This involves having a genuine desire for mutually beneficial solutions or agreements in your relationships. Valuing and respecting people by understanding a win for all is ultimately a better long-term resolution than if only one person in the situation had gotten their way. Think win-win isn't about being nice, nor is it a quick fix technique. It is a character-based code for human interaction and collaboration. Habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This involves using empathetic listening to genuinely understand the other person, which compels them to reciprocate the listening and take an open mind to being influenced by you. This creates an atmosphere of caring and positive problem solving. Habit 6. Synergize. Combine the strengths of people through positive teamwork so as to achieve goals that no one could have done alone. Now, let's look at a number of suttas in which the Buddha identified the root cause, the source of disputes. We will start with a sutta in which the Buddha approached Anuruddha and 2 other monks who had been staying together in harmony. The Buddha asked, "How do you live in concord, in mutual appreciation without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes?" Yeah, I like that simile, blending like milk and water. The monk Anuruddha replied, "We maintain bodily, verbal, and mental acts of loving kindness, openly and privately towards each other. Everything that they think, say, or do is with metta, both in front of the other person and behind their backs. We each consider, why should I not set aside what I wish to do and do what the others want to do? Compromising for the greater good is thinking win-win. I am happy because the group is happy. We are different in body, but we are of one mind. In other words, we are different people, but we share the same attitudes." The Buddha said, when monks argue, 3 things are being cultivated. First, attachment to sense objects. Actually, in another sutta, the Buddha expanded this to include attachment to sense objects and attachment to persons. Second, thoughts of ill will. And third, thoughts of harming. The Buddha continued, when monks argue, 3 things have been abandoned. First, thoughts of contentment. Second, thoughts of benevolence. And third, thoughts of non-harming. Now let's look into the source of disputes in a little bit more detail. Once, an ascetic asked the Buddha in a very rude way, "What is your doctrine?" The Buddha answered, "I teach in such a way that one does not dispute with anyone in the world." Now the Buddha answered this way to contrast his approach with the rude attitude of the ascetic. The Buddha then gave a short, cryptic explanation. "I teach so that one's perceptions do not overwhelm that individual who is detached from sense pleasures." The ascetic was completely confused and walked away. A monk who had witnessed this exchange asked the Buddha to explain what is meant by, "I teach in such a way that one does not dispute with anyone in the world. I teach so that one's perceptions do not overwhelm that individual who is detached from sense pleasures." The Buddha gave a slightly longer but still confusing answer. When there are no perceptions born of mental proliferation to overwhelm an individual, if nothing is found there to delight in, this is the end of the bad latent tendencies. This is the end of disputes with anyone in the world. The Buddha then went to take a rest, but the monks were still confused, and so they approached Venerable Mahakaccana, who is known for his expertise in explaining the Buddha's teachings. The monks asked Venerable Mahakaccana to explain, and he said, "Dependent on the eye and visible forms, eye consciousness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. With contact as a condition, there is feeling. In other words, when there is a working eye and something to see, eye consciousness naturally arises in the mind and there is seeing. The mind contacts the visible object and a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling naturally arises. This is a completely automatic process, like a natural chemical reaction that happens all the time. What one feels, that one perceives. What one perceives, that one thinks about. What one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. Now at this stage, things become personal. Though the same visible image may appear at the back of your retina and the back of my retina, our perceptions will be different. What we think about the visible object will be different, and how we get lost in thought regarding the object will be different. Mental proliferation is becoming lost in our thoughts. Mental proliferation is our imagination. Then there are perceptions born of mental proliferations to overwhelm an individual based on what is seen through the eye. In other words, with our imaginings as the source, perceptions based on our imagination overwhelms us based on what is presented at the eye. The sutta then repeats the same sequence for the other senses, ear, nose, tongue, and so on. Here is this sutta presented as a diagram. Dependent on the eye and visible forms, eye consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as a condition, there is feeling. What one feels, that one perceives. What one perceives, that one thinks about. What one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. Then there are perceptions born of mental proliferations to overwhelm an individual based on what is seen through the eye. Now, the initial part of the process, up until the arising of feeling, is an impersonal, natural reaction. The subjective processes of perceiving and thinking about lead to mental proliferation, which is the source of the problem. It is this mental proliferation that is the source of disputes. Now let's go back to what the Buddha said. When there are no perceptions born of mental proliferation to overwhelm an individual, if nothing is found there to delight in, this is the end of the bad latent tendencies. This is the end of disputes with anyone in the world. So what the Buddha is saying is that if nothing is found to delight in our imaginings, then this is the end of the bad underlying tendencies, and this is the end of disputes. In other words, it is getting caught up in our imaginings that leads to disputes. A person who has trained their mind and does not get caught up in imaginings does not dispute with anyone in the world. Here is another interesting sutta in which Sakka, the king of the Devas, asks the Buddha a very deep question. Why, although beings wish to live without hate, without harming, without hostility, and in peace, do beings actually live in hate, harming one another, with hostility, and without peace? The Buddha answered, it is because of envy and selfishness. So why do envy and selfishness arise? It is because of likes and dislikes. So why do likes and dislikes arise? It is because of craving. Now this is craving to acquire something or craving to change something. Okay, why does craving arise? It is because of bad thinking. And why does bad thinking arise? It is because of mental proliferation. Mental proliferation are our imaginings. Now comes the most important question. Sakka asked, how does one overcome mental proliferation? The Buddha explained, there are two types of feelings, to be pursued and not to be pursued. Feelings to be pursued cause good mental states to increase and bad mental states to decline. Feelings not to be pursued cause bad mental states to increase and good mental states to decline. Now this diagram explains the Buddha's response. As mentioned earlier, sense contact and feelings are impersonal, natural reactions to sense objects. The mental states which follow may be either good or bad. Good mental states are rooted in non-attachment, generosity and contentment, non-aversion, loving-kindness and patience, and understanding, which is wisdom. If the mental states arising from the feelings are good, then this is a training to be pursued. Bad mental states are rooted in attachment, aversion, and delusion. If the mental states arising from the feelings are bad, then this is a training to be abandoned. The Buddha was asked why followers of other sects argued with the followers of competing sects. The followers of other sects are blind, not knowing what is beneficial and what is harmful, not knowing what is truth and what is non-truth. They keep disputing, saying, the truth is like this, it's not like that. The truth's not like that, it's like this. Then the Buddha gave this famous simile. Once, a king gathered together people who had been blind since birth and showed them an elephant. Some of the blind people were shown the elephant's head. Some of the blind people were shown the elephant's ear. Some of the blind people were shown the elephant's tusk. Some of the blind people were shown the elephant's tail. The blind people who had been shown the elephant's head said, the elephant is just like a jar. Those who had been shown the elephant's ear said, the elephant is just like a big leaf, and so on. Saying the elephant is like this, it's not like that, the elephant's not like that, it's like this, the blind people struck one another with their fists. So each blind person has their own perception based on their own limited understanding. Having perceived only a part of the truth, they assume that they have completely understood the truth and dispute with followers of competing sects. On the other hand, the Buddha had seen the complete truth and does not need to dispute with others who have only seen part of the truth. In fact, the Buddha can guide the others to see more of the truth. The Buddha differentiated between disputes arising from different understanding, different meaning, and disputes arising from different ways of saying something, different phrasing. When a monk quotes the Dhamma, if he misinterprets the meaning and mistakes the phrasing, then you should say, if this is the meaning, the phrasing may be either this or that. Which is more fitting? If this is the phrasing, the meaning may be either this or that. Which is more fitting? If he replies inaccurately, then explain politely the correct meaning and phrasing. Notice the expression explain politely. This implies that your explanation should be presented softly and gently. If he misinterprets the meaning but gets the phrasing right, then you should say, if this is the phrasing, the meaning may be either this or that. Which is more fitting? If he replies inaccurately, then explain politely the correct meaning. If he interprets the meaning correctly but mistakes the phrasing, you should say, if this is the meaning, then the phrasing may either be this or that. Which is more fitting? If he replies inaccurately, then explain politely the correct phrasing. But if he interprets the meaning correctly and gets the phrasing right, you should show respect and say, Sadhu, we are very fortunate to have a monk who is well versed in the meaning and the phrasing as one of our spiritual companions. This next sutta is advice to monks when they witness other monks disputing. Again, the Buddha differentiates between disputes over meaning and disputes over phrasing. If monks make different assertions about the Dhamma, you may say, you differ about both the meaning and phrasing. This is why you're disputing. Don't dispute. What has been misinterpreted should be acknowledged as such. Or you might say, you differ about meaning but agree about phrasing. This is why you are disputing. Don't dispute. What has been wrongly grasped should be acknowledged as such, and what has been rightly grasped should be acknowledged as such. Or you may say, you agree about meaning but differ about phrasing. This is why you are disputing. But the phrasing is a mere trifle. Do not dispute over a mere trifle. What has been correctly interpreted should be acknowledged as such, and what has been misinterpreted should be acknowledged as such. This is an important point. Phrasing is a mere trifle. Or you may say, you agree about both the meaning and the phrasing. Don't dispute. What has been correctly interpreted should be acknowledged as such. Phrasing is trivial, a mere trifle, but phrasing is not the only consideration that should be put aside when deciding how to approach a dispute. It is important to stick to the core. The rest is trivial. This is a continuation of the previous sutta. If you see a monk commit an offense, you may reflect, it will be easy for me as he's not stubborn. He will not be angry as he's not given to resentment. I can help him improve. In this case, it is proper to speak. In other words, what is core is helping the other monk to improve. Or, it will be easy for me as he is not stubborn, but he's going to be angry because he's given to resentment, but I can help him improve. In this case, it is proper to speak. It's a mere trifle that he will be angry, but it is a much greater thing that I can help him to improve. Or, it will be difficult for me as he is stubborn. But he will not be angry as he is not given to resentment. I can help him improve. In this case, it is proper to speak. It is a mere trifle that is difficult for me, but it is a much greater thing that I can help him to improve. Or, it will be difficult for me as he is stubborn. He will be angry as he is given to resentment, but I can help him improve. In this case, it is proper to speak. It is a mere trifle that it's difficult for me and that he gets angry, but it is a much greater thing that I can help him to improve. I'm reminded of the Buddha just after his enlightenment. The Buddha reflected, spreading the Dhamma would be a great trouble for me, but there are those with less dust in their eyes who will appreciate it. Or, it will be difficult for me as he is stubborn. He will be angry as he is given to resentment. I cannot help him to improve. In this case, equanimity is appropriate. In other words, what is core is helping the other person to improve. If this is possible, in spite of any other challenges, then it should be undertaken. If it is not possible to help the other person to improve, equanimity reflecting all beings are subject to their karma is appropriate. The Buddha's message in this sutta is easier to understand when presented as a flowchart. If you see a monk committing an offense, it doesn't matter if it will be easy or difficult for you. It doesn't matter if the offending monk will get angry or not. If you can help the offending monk to improve, then it's proper to speak. If you cannot help the offending monk to improve, then equanimity is important. Now, another approach is that if arguments arise, you may ask yourself, would the Buddha censure this? Or, does this lead to spiritual development? Now, here's another example of focusing on the core, the rest being trivial. This next sutta took place when the Buddha was already quite old. Ananda, the personal attendant of the Buddha, reported, "The leader of the Jains has just died, and his disciples are now quarreling with each other. Let no dispute arise in the Sangha when the Buddha has gone." Jainism was founded about the same time as Buddhism and continues to exist today as a religion in India. The leader of the Jains did not appoint a successor, and this led to a dispute among his followers when he died. The Buddha also did not appoint a successor, but rather said, "Let the Dhamma, the teachings, be your leader when I am gone." Now, in this sutta, the Buddha was specific about the core teachings. All monks must agree on the 37 aids to enlightenment, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts, the 4 bases of spiritual power, 5 faculties, 5 powers, 7 enlightenment factors, and 8-fold noble path. Now, I'm not even going to try to explain these 37 aids to enlightenment today, but these are the core teachings of the Buddha. Other items, such as livelihood and the patimokkha, aren't trivial by comparison. Now, the patimokkha are the rules for the monks and nuns. The first time that I read this sutta, I was shocked that the Buddha would refer to the patimokkha as trivial. It really emphasized the fact that the 37 aids to enlightenment are the core of the Buddhist teachings. Though they may vary in many other areas, all the Buddhist traditions maintain the core of the 37 aids to enlightenment. Perhaps this is why there's never been a religious war between different schools of Buddhism. Here is a story from the commentaries about how the Buddha prevented a battle. There were 2 countries separated by a river. Both countries relied on the river to irrigate their crops. During a drought, each country wanted to divert the river to ensure that their crops would get enough water. Armies assembled on both sides of the river, and the Buddha spoke to both armies. Which is of greater value, water or blood? For the sake of some water, which is of little value, you should not destroy your lives, which are of so much value. You live hating your enemies, but I have none to hate. Both armies respected the Buddha and agreed that what the Buddha was saying was correct. The battle was prevented. Normally, during a dispute, we are focusing on the other person's argument, our own argument, and the other person's behavior. The Buddha said that we should also focus on our own behavior. Monks, there are 2 kinds of fools. One who does not see an offense as an offense, and second, one who, when another is confessing an offense, does not pardon him. According to the rules for monks, if a monk offends against another and apologizes, the other monk should accept the apology. So we should acknowledge when we make a mistake, and we should pardon others who confess their mistakes to us. If a monk who has committed an offense and the monk who scolds him do not each thoroughly reflect upon themselves, there will be bad feelings between them for a long time, and the monks will not dwell at ease. So what does it mean by each thoroughly reflect upon themselves? The monk who has committed an offense should thoroughly reflect. I have committed an offense. That monk saw me doing so and expressed his displeasure to me. I therefore became displeased and informed others. I am like a traveler who avoids paying customs duties. The commentary explains that the 3 mistakes committed by this monk are first committing the offense, second being displeased when scolded, and third informing others. The analogy of being like a traveler who avoids paying custom duties means that the traveler cannot blame the customs agent or the government for his crime. The traveler is himself responsible. So the monk who commits the offense cannot put any blame on the monk who scolds him. The scolding monk should thoroughly reflect. That monk committed an offense. I saw him doing so and expressed my displeasure to him. He therefore became displeased and informed others. I am like a traveler who avoids paying customs duties. The commentary explains that the 2 mistakes committed by the scolding monk are first becoming overcome by displeasure, and second, scolding the other monk because of this displeasure. Scolding should be done with a loving heart and intention to help the offending monk. Scolding should not be done because of displeasure. Again, like a traveler who avoids paying customs duties, the scolding monk cannot blame the monk who committed the offense for his mishandling of the situation. So in summary, it is naive to assume that disputes will not arise, and the Buddha recommended skillful means to settle disputes among monks. We can apply these skillful means when settling disputes among ourselves as lay people. Now is the time for questions and answers.